Good morning, everyone. All right, so this week in Buy Back Your Time, we are going through chapters 9 through 11. Today's call will probably be short because 9 through 11 was pretty short. So, chapter 9, let's go ahead and dig in. Chapter 9 is the only four time hacks you need. And he talks about the $50 magic pill, thinking meetings with repeat agenda, what a definition of done means, and the 1-3-1 rule. So, hack number one is the $50 magic pill. And what he means by that is kind of empowering his team. So, for instance, one of his rules is anyone on his team can spend up to $500 to fix a problem without getting permission. And CEOs who run his companies spend up to 5,000. So I would say that's similar to like you guys as my VAs that I empower you guys when you schedule photos. We have the parameters set in place of based on square footage, what type of photo packages we use, and you're empowered to just go ahead, book those, and pay those as they come due. And he says the amount isn't important, it's the principle. So why get bogged down fixing a small problem when someone else on your team could fix it just as well without your involvement? Whether it's $50 or 5,000, give everyone on your team an allowance that enables them to efficiently fix problems without ever asking to get you involved. And then hack number two is sync meetings with a repeat agenda, which I think we do a good job of already. So we have our repeating calls Monday through Friday. And then we also do our listing call on Tuesdays so that we all know what the agenda is. We can move forward quickly. And something that I found interesting. So on page 151, he says that he has a 7-point meeting agenda that creates the tailwind for all of these goals. So the first one is offload, which I think is very similar to what I do is offload. So I keep a separate list of my to-dos and my action items. And then when we go through our meeting, then I kind of go through all of those and offload those items to whoever that's important to. Next, he reviews his calendar. They go through past meetings. They go through any action items and then feedback loop on projects. So anyone brings up projects that they've assigned so that they can update on the progress, discuss roadblocks, and then inform him once they've been completed. Number 6 is emails. And then number 7 is any questions. So they finish up any questions that they have. Oh, I thought Rio was coming in. Nope. So it says, if we finish all of the above before 30 minutes, my administrative assistant asks these questions to build context about me and the ways that she could better support me. Dan, how are you feeling right now? How are you decompressing? What reoccurring problems are keeping you up at night? So then hack number 3 on page 153 is the definition of done, which I find this one very interesting. I think this is probably something as a team that we could work on together. It says, there's one thing many entrepreneurs think, no one ever does it right. And there's an easy hack to solve the problem, a definition of done, or as I like to call it, a DOD. So a DOD means definition of done. So he says, I use this for every person at every level in my company. For instance, when I asked my administrative assistant to purchase a whiteboard, I give them a DOD. So when that whiteboard is requested to be purchased, his idea of a definition of done is this task is done when the whiteboard is hanging on the wall in my office. There are 4 colored markers and there's a dry erase marker handy. In simple cases like this, a quick, simple definition is all you need to offer. So I think this is very important, especially when we are working as remotely as we all are with each other, to just make sure we're on the same page. to either, when a task is being given, ask what the DOD is, or vice versa. If you're not understanding completely what my definition of DOD is, then you can always ask. And then hack number 4 is the 1-3-1 rule, which is it says before staff was allowed to ask for Brad's help, they had to verbally define a singular narrow problem. Next, they had to consider and offer 3 realistic paths to overcome that problem. And finally, they had to give Brad their single recommendation for the 3 options. So this is on page 155. So 1-3-1 is broken down. Number 1, define the one problem that needs to be solved. 3, offer 3 viable solutions. And then 1, make 1 suggestion from the list of possible solutions. So this is very familiar. This is very similar to what we talked about before about empowering our team. And I think that's kind of similar to what I do with you guys, that when you come to me and ask a question, I say, well, how would you answer that? Or what would you do if I wasn't available? And that's you kind of coming up with those suggestions on your own as well. And so that kind of finishes up chapter 9. Chapter 10 was it's called the test first hiring method. And it was kind of a short chapter. I didn't really have a whole bunch of takeaways within that. So I kind of skipped over that and moved directly into chapter 11. See, I told you this was going to go fast today. So chapter 11 is titled Transformational Leadership. So it says, don't tell people how to do things, tell them what to do and let them surprise you with their results. A great example is Adam, my head of people, came to me in 2021 with a problem. I need to hire 11 people in the next quarter. How on earth am I going to do that? Adam was feeling pressure. I checked to make sure he didn't just need someone to listen. He didn't. He wanted a solution. So I directed Adam to the hiring manager in his department, which is Adam. And I said, Adam, if you need help, I'll cancel meetings, I'll brainstorm, do whatever is necessary to support you. However, ultimately, this is why I hired you. He got up, cracked a smile, and left the room. He says, I'll be back after I thought more about it. But just like Miranda in chapter 4, he never came back. 2 months later, we ended up with 11 outstanding new team members. So what he did with Adam was simple. He transferred the ownership of the solution back onto Adam. And then it goes to break down the difference between transactional management versus transformational leadership. And that's covered on pages 172 to 173. On 175, I've actually had this conversation has actually come up quite a bit lately for me in some different circumstances. But on page 175, he says, studies have consistently shown that decision fatigue can set in after a leader or anyone else makes repeated decisions. So it says, forecast accuracy declines over the course of a day as the number of forecasts the analyst has already issued increases. In other words, we're all going to make a limited number of excellent decisions today, but we need to save those for the area where we can produce most benefits. So that's what I do a lot of when I'm empowering you guys to answer your own questions when I know that you know them, because the more decisions any of us have to make throughout the day, the more fatigued and inaccurate we get throughout the day. Any comments on any of that? Then on 178, it goes into measuring, which the thing that stuck out to me the most in this was kind of how we monitor and track our KPIs. And so he talks about different types of measurements and how motivation increases based on those measurements as well. It says, once people know their one number and how that number helps, it helps to drive success. And then the very last thing he talks about in chapter 11 is the coach framework. So the C and the O on page 181 talks about the core issue. So that part focuses on the underlying principle, not just a one off situation. So there may be a situation that comes up, but that's not really maybe the underlying issue that's actually going on. A stands for the actual story. So the coach could share a personal or a vulnerable story of how they dealt with the same issue. And then CH stands for change. Try to enroll commitment to change, recognizing that ultimately it's their decision. So it says, notice that I focus on the broader issue, the core principle, instead of the one off situation. Also, I focus on exactly one issue at a time. So it says, if a coach were to help you run a marathon, here's what they would do: set the outcome, which would be to complete the 2023 Boston Marathon. The second part would be to measure your weekly progress with a metric. That would be like how many miles you're going to run per week, and then coach you to success. So, an example is don't run so hard in the beginning or you'll gas yourself out. Accomplishing business goals works the same way. As a transformational leader, describe the outcome, offer a metric, and coach to success. Any thoughts or comments on that? Everybody's so quiet today. So, what's one takeaway from everything we just discussed? Erica.
I think I'd go with questions that verifying everything just to make sure that you understand um each task that are like um assigned to you, and
Yep.
the best practice that we always do, most especially me working for you as your listing manager, would be every time you ask me to prepare a listing docs for a certain property, I would always ask when you need it by, just to make sure
Yeah.
that we're on the same page.
And what did he call that in the book? Or what's the
The
acronym?
DOD.
DOD. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Mm,
Definition of done. That's a good
mm-hmm.
example too.
Yeah.
Carmela, any takeaways?
For me, I think the transfer of ownership. So
Mhm.
like the biggest takeaway was like don't tell people how to do things.
Yeah.
Tell them what to do and let them surprise you with the results.
And I think that's probably something I always have to work on when he's talking about. Let me find it really quick. Um, transformational leadership versus transformational versus transactional. Like, I know you guys know what needs to be done, and I need to allow you to just do it and not micromanage you instead of working just more towards a leadership role and knowing that you can get it done and your way of doing it. It might be different than mine, and that's okay. It kind of goes back to earlier in the book when he talked about somebody else doing 80% is 100% done for us, right? Um, who else? LU, any takeaways?
Well, same with Carmela, I guess. As someone who handles your digital marketing, um, I guess that's something that I need to do for surprise you with the result.
Ria, what about you?
Um, First it's yeah, also same with Carmela, but um I guess I'm trying to do that sometimes when there's something that a VA is asking me about. I don't Of course, most of the time I need to show how it's done, but when I know they've already been trained about that, um what I do is I don't like for example, they ask me how to do some things that I know they already know, but maybe they forgot. And then what I do is like, okay, so you'll find this you can go to this process document so you can
Mhm.
refresh yourself and not exactly tell them this is the
Yeah.
step by step on how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that will kind of direct them back to maybe like the next time they are like, oh, I need to work on something. Oh, I can go back to the process docs. And that kind of
Yes.
eliminates you from the picture from there.
Yes, that's right. And the other thing was the last one, that you talked about having like a metric. I think it mostly applies whenever I do my 12-week year,
Hmm.
to make sure that there are metrics or the goal should be measurable.
Yeah. I think probably out of all of us, the easiest one that probably falls into is LU because we kind of track the KPIs on
Mm,
like everything we send out and open rates and things like that. For the VA, the other VAs, it's probably a little bit more difficult, but I would agree probably the main metric that we use for everyone is using the 12-week year. So, well, good job, everyone. I told you that was going to be quick. So next week, we're finishing up this book already. So next week will be chapter 12 through the conclusion. So it's 12, 13, 14, and then the conclusion, but they're pretty small chapters as well. So we will finish it up that next week. And then I'm starting to figure out what our next book club is going to be, and maybe a book that might um pertain more towards the virtual assistants and more things that maybe you guys do consistently. So I might have a couple options for you guys next week, and we'll vote on which one we think might be the best to move forward after this one. So thank you all for joining me today, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
bye.
Bye.